here in New York City and the Pacifica board itself. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, well, you about answered it. The New York station, WBAI, is part of Pacifica Foundation, which was formed to bring progressive radio to America. And one of their outstanding original acts was to broadcast the convention of the Communist Party. And this was a long time ago. And as you know, the history of the Communist Party in America, the history of the media, was that even say the word communist was considered a criminal act. And as you know, what they did to Paul Robeson for mentioning communism. And so the Pacifica has a reputation, and it was built for this very purpose, to bring all of the news, all of what's happening, instead of what a few people, we call the corporate media, decides that American people should hear. And opened up by saying that my participation in the UFT, United Federation of Teachers, was different than what we have going on today in WBAI. It is not different. It is the same struggle, and it is the struggle to keep progressive voice in front of the people. I can't remember who it was that said the truth must not only be the truth, but the truth and is in the business, the radio business of telling. And the same thing that happened to the UFT, it was a concept, it was an idea that was going to bring unions to teachers. That is, bring the educational voice, power of the teachers in the educational issues.
Well, Ralph, because we have limited time, can we focus rather exclusively on WBAI in terms of what happened and what led up to the radio being taken over? I understand the National Pacifica Board just came in without any notice. They closed down the office and trashed the office. So if we could just start with what they did and why the National Board did attempt to abolish this radio station.
Constant struggle to be progressive in America with every institution. This is pushback by the neocons within our movement who claim to be on our side.
Yes.
Now, when they came in and took over the program, it was because there were problems in WBAI.
So Ralph, first, tell us where WBAI was located, and give us an overview of the producers, and then get into the fractionalism that was in BAI before, that some have argued may have precipitated the takeover.
The WBAI had moved its headquarters to Atlantic Avenue. There was a question.
We're losing you. Do you have your speaker?
That came out of the bills that BAI. I'm speaking right into the phone. Hello?
Oh, yes. Yes, part of your call is being dropped, so I just wondered whether or not you had your speakerphone on. But please continue.
Yes, WBAI had moved its headquarters to Atlantic Avenue, a more positive place where it was easier for people to get the station. And because of economic problems in BAI, this was the excuse that some of the members of the foundation used to attack BAI. But if you understand that the economy across the nation is in trouble, all of the Pacific stations have an economic problem.
And how many
Because-
stations are there, and where are they located? So we can have a general overview of the Pacifica Foundation. There's WBAI, and there are other affiliate stations. And where are they? And then
Hello?
we'll have a larger context for
Hey.
the. Hello?
APFA in California, San Francisco, Houston, Washington, D.C. I forget the other two, and I hope people are not angry with me, but that really points up the problem with BAI and how people see the solution. WBAI is the center of the media world. We have a good signal in a most populous area in the center of communications for the world, for the nation. And so BAI is a very valuable institution. And so there are some within within the Pacifica organization that feel if they sell the signal of WBAI, which is the most valuable signal in Pacifica, they can solve the problems of all of the other stations. And this is the root of the problem. Now, the fact of the matter is that it was done illegally. As any institution, Pacifica has rules and regulations. And one of the things before anyone moves or before the leadership of Pacifica can move, they have to have the okay or the support of the national board. That's what the national board was about. They did not have the support of the national board. They did not have the vote. And this is where we are right now. We're fighting to keep them from getting the vote. It has been tied up until a few days ago. And last night, the tie was broken. But because people did not understand that we, the progressives, had the upper hand, they were allowed themselves to be cut off of the phone call. It was a national phone call of the Pacific Board coming out of California. And when the vote came, several of the people who were eligible to vote, their phones were muted. Therefore, there's a meeting today. Redo last night's meeting, and I'm hoping that everybody gets on the call so that we can reverse this trend. They took over the station, and for a while they changed the way the station was used. Instead of focusing basically on local news, they were focusing on news that came out of other stations around the country. And BAI was specifically formed for news in the New York area, not to the exclusion of international news, but about New York. There has been an ongoing fight, and I would say the last 15 years. We had a very progressive group of people running BAI, but there was a constant anger, constant effort to do away with them. You know the names, Bernard White, etc. Had a wonderful local station, and you know of some of the actions that were taken and how effective this station was, how many listeners we had. And then an example of it was when Tariq Warren and his wife were beaten on Atlantic Avenue. Within a half hour, half of New York and Brooklyn had turned out to the police station to protest. This is how effective this station was. This station raised money. It was profitable. And the cancer of those less progressive people, and I'm being very judicious and careful when I call them less progressive, those people who did not understand, or those people who did not like the way the station related to people of color. They did not like the positive relationship that was out there, and they wanted to turn the station into an NPR type of station. Now, and that brings, we must understand that the present political realities must be considered. That is, the whole world is swinging to the right. NPR swung to the right. And it's a constant trending away from the original mission of Pacifica. And the corporate media has to have had moles in our organization to fight this, or it could have been just pure racism. And as my son used to say to me, if these people are not paid by the government to destroy Pacifica, they should be on the government payroll, because they are just about there and destroying New York. And I say clearly, if Pacifica, if WBAI is being destroyed, it will just be the first of the Pacifica stations to fall. We must not allow WBAI to fall. And I see that people are kicking in, and if we have the station back fully in our hands, those funds will be raised within 6 months. And so we must keep Pacifica, we must keep it out of the hands of those who have taken illegal recent actions to shut us down and to use Pacifica Pro stations from around the country to bring the news.
Okay,
And,
Ralph,
there
let's...
was a legitimacy, a limited legitimacy.
Ralph, let's go back Ralph, let's go back to the National Pacifica Board. So, because you are very close to this, and so all of it falls into place for you, which may not be the case for our listeners. Now, the National Pacifica Board that has administrative control of WBAI, in addition to 4 other radio stations, took a vote that was split 11-11 because it's a 22-member board. There was a tie, and based on that, the faction that is for closing down WBAI took it upon themselves to come into New York City to raid the WBAI radio station. They closed it down. They changed the locks. They trashed the studio. They took out a code that is essential for broadcasting. And as many have speculated, the prime reason for all of this is to sell the signal, which is worth millions of dollars. Now, as the negotiations have continued, there was another vote in which that 11-11 vote changed to 10-12 on the side of those who want to close down the station, correct?
No. First of all, the takeover was preceded without a vote. The Pacifica National Board knew nothing about it.
Oh,
we
my.
only heard about it after it happened. This was an illegal action. Only after this illegal action did the Pacifica Board meet on this issue, and it has been going back and forth. It was tied. It went to court. There was a restraining order. The restraining order is removed, and now this is why we have the problem. There was a restraining order to stop them from doing what they were doing. In court, we lost the battle in court, but they had to bring it to the people. And this is when it came to the Pacifica National Board. And this is when the tie votes and the muting, etc. And it continues we had a meeting last night. There will be another meeting today of the Pacifica National Board, which will bring more clarification as to the direction in which BAI and which Pacifica will go. But it's because it started out illegitimately. Even though there were causes for concern, it cannot continue, because to continue the path taken in recent days is a losing strategy in a relevant arena. And that is the arena of everyday broadcasting. We must not lose this station to a national station for broadcasting, although there are some wonderful programs that have been broadcast nationally and brought to Pacifica, brought to BAI. That is not the true mission of WBAI. We could include, and it is always included, the national question, but the heart of BAI was for local New York news, and it was very successful in doing so. And so those who were involved in the takeover used beautiful words such as, we are going to cooperate with people in New York and make WBAI more successful. Well, they didn't need to take over to cooperate with people in New York to make WBAI and all other Pacifica stations successful. And so we see that as a con to take over BAI and then turn it into something that does not stand for progressive information or progressive radio. And my big interest is recognizing how important WBAI is in bringing news of our political prisoners, bringing news of the corrupt educational system, bringing news about housing. And there's so many things that the BAI does in a positive manner that is important to New Yorkers, and we fear that is slowly being taken away. And this takeover was the final grasp of those less progressive people to destroy the WBAI voice.
Well, Ralph, let me ask.
Fighting against.
Ralph, let me ask you this: if in fact the National Pacifica Board did not vote for this illegal action against WBAI, there was never a vote, as you just laid out, by the entire Pacifica Board. Who were and who are the individuals or faction that took it upon themselves to close down the station? And since it was not a declared vote from the Pacifica Foundation, have those forces been repudiated for this illegal action? One can describe it, because it did not come from the National Board itself. Only after the fact was it addressed before the Pacifica Foundation.
Well, you have hit the nail on the head with that question. That's where we are now. There was not only did the board, the National Board, which is set up to deal with questions like that, given a chance to deal with it, we did not even know about it until after it happened. Therefore, it went to court. It is in court, but is dealing with it. We've had a meeting every night, sometimes 4 or 5 hours long, in this issue and trying to solve it. I said to you, there will be a meeting this afternoon at 5:30 p.m. And we will be dealing with this question of how to get our station back, how to set up permanent plans to continue in the direction that the BAI has been in, set, solidified, so that we don't have to worry about tomorrow morning, will BAI be there, or will there be another takeover by a shaky group of people who were merely in their positions as interim And these interim people took it upon themselves to take over the program illegally, and that's where we are now. We're fighting that in and out of court. But I think one of the important things is that you're bringing this to your listeners. And when we have our fundraiser, which is a major problem, now that people are aware at the possibility of losing WBAI, we will be able to raise those funds briefly. And those who took over the station said they took it over to increase the funds. But what they did was in the middle of a fundraiser where they're losing funds. And every projection of their takeover says that they're going to lose more funds, and it will be impossible for BAI to come back originally as BAI was, or impossible for WBAI to exist, because then they will have grounds for selling it if it cannot operate. And so we have two problems. Our first problem is financial. We must overcome this financial deficit that we are operating on. And with people like yourself and programs like yourself, letting people know what's going on, we will be able to do that. And secondly, we'll have to deal with those out of California who took this upon themselves, to this action without following the procedures that were set out by Pacifica to run a station.
Well, WBAI, two issues I want to address with you, and that is the continuous problem of fundraising for WBAI. I mean, that is a reality. And secondly, the infighting in the station itself, which is some have described as quite toxic. Could this move on behalf of the National Pacifica Board bridge some of those divisions and dissensions within the station itself? Is this a wake-up call for unity on these dissenting factions?
This could be a wake-up call. You know, everybody doesn't listen to the wake-up calls. You can go on snooze and go back to sleep. This is what we're... Earl Maitland pointed out very well, who was on the WBAI staff 15, 20 years ago, when it was very successful, pointed out that there was always an element that opposed going on in terms of programming that was successful and that was economically successful. And as I stated early on, we must consider the realities of the constant trending away from the original progressive, almost revolutionary program mission of Pacifica. And so there's always that fight, and I believe that was the fight. There you have boundaries. Racism, being charitable, when I say less progressive, and of reactionary forces, Pacifica and BAI, who would never take on such as in broadcasting events of the Communist Party in a day when to even say the word negative. Very necessary, because we must raise these issues of Islamophobia, of racism, of anti-Muslim sentiments, anti-gay sentiments. We must have a strong signal to focus on these issues constantly, so as not to be overrun and overturned by what the world seems to be overrun with, and that is a fascist type of government and fascist types of media. We need truth in media, and DAI can give us that.
Ralph?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes. So let's talk about something that you addressed earlier in your analysis, and that is what is happening to progressive voices nationally and locally, nationally and internationally, and this shift toward the right. Give us some political context for this, because BAI fits into this paradigm.
Yes, it certainly did. And as you know, BAI was one of the first stations to bring up the problems with migration, and BAI has had a constant critique of America around racism. They bring issues of racism and imperialism that take place in America and around the world. And one of the first stations to admit that the problem with migration was one that you could see years ago. And the problem of migration and immigration started with imperialism. When you go to someone else's country and take everything out and bring it to your country, to America, so that they cannot live, they're going to follow their resources to America, to Europe, to wherever the resources went. And this is obvious. Anybody who doesn't see that is some type of fool, or someone who doesn't want to see that and would like to continue on their path to total imperialism. You can't have imperialism without migration. That is people following their money. And so Africans are following their money to Europe. And as the head of Turkey said, the next time Europe says anything to them about their solidifying their borders, they're going to send the people they have in their country that have been moved by imperialism, he's going to let them go to Europe. That's a powerful statement. And so what is the solution? First, we tell the people about the problem, how we got to the problem, and how we solve it. Solve the problem of imperialism in some place like Honduras, places where America has supported a very go to the right, then people will want to go home and live in their countries. The place catching up to America in terms of imprisoned people is Egypt. They got so many people they put in prison that they don't have any prisons for them, so they put them in army bases. Then those bases become overcrowded, and they're not allowed to come to America because they're Muslims, and so they move to other European countries, and it creates a destabilization of the world. This is what imperialism has done. It has destabilized the world, and we begin here in New York by putting out the truth on these issues, by putting out the truth of politicians who claim to be for solving these problems progressively, but we show that they're not solving them progressively, that they go back on their word, they say A and do Z, and this is the importance of a station like BAI with the willingness to bring this message to the people. And this is where we get the support from the regressive forces within BAI. They don't want the truth out there, but as somebody else said clearly, they want to whiten WBAI.
Well, we only have 2 minutes left. Can you tell our listeners what is it that you're asking the public to do? I understand there is an emergency meeting that's coming up. People are being asked to send emails to the National Pacifica Board. Can you tell us specifically what is it that you want the public to do in response to supporting WBAI?
What we want people to include in their messages to the National Pacific Board is to the question of where is the money going. There's a fund fundraising. There's a whole apparatus to raise funds for WBAI in New York. Where is that money going? Where are the programs that the BAI has? The wonderful catalog, the wonderful recordings that BAI has. The National has taken over. This is a terrible thing. It's a terrible loss of resource and assets of BAI.
And what is the email address of the National Pacifica Board? How do you want people to send in their protest against the coup or the takeover? Do you have that?
I do not have that in front of me, but it just turn to BAI. Listen to the station. Listen to your emails. My phone never stops buzzing. It has been buzzing all night long. People sending emails. It's out there. Contact one of your friends, because on your alternate media, your cell phone, because this is where the information is. It's on your cell phone, on your email. Look that up, and you'll see every name of the Pacifica National Board. We've been bombarded with emails, but we all know the message. The message is restore BAI to what it was before the coup that happened last week.
Okay.
That's where we begin.
Yes, and to our listeners, if you care to join in this campaign, and we encourage everyone to do so, remember the progressive voices on radio, in particular black radio, has diminished and continues to do so. So if you want to know about WBAI, just go to your phones, and you just do a search for WBAI Takeover, and the information will be there. And Ralph, we do have a web page, and I will make sure that this information is posted under my program on our web page, and that would be the web page ghcr.nyc. Ralph Pointer, thank you very much. Anytime you want to come back, just get in touch with me. Thank you very much, Ralph.
So much for having me, and the issue of Pacifica. Thanks again.
Thank you. Folks, you have been listening to Behind the News for Liberation and Political Consciousness. I'm your host and producer, Nellie Hester Bailey, in the studio of GHCR.NYC. We're going to take a short break, and we're going to bring in some more of Miles Davis while we bring on our next guest, who is Danny Vila, who is going to talk about an upcoming housing conference at St. Mary's Church on October 26th. And he's going to talk about some other issues as well, because he had a radio program on WBAI, he and other host and producer, Voice Latina. And it was was broadcast in Spanish and in English. And that was the type of programming you could find on WBAI. And again, I'm your host and producer, Nellie Hester Bailey, here in the studios of GHCR.NYC. We're going to take a short break, and we're going to bring on some more Miles Davis. And we'll be right back. Hello, folks, and welcome back to Behind the News for Liberation and Political Consciousness. I'm your host and producer, Nellie Hester Bailey, and we're going to resume our program right here from GHCR.NYC Radio. And that lead-in music was Miles Davis. So what? Our next guest who is on the line is Danny Vila. Now remember, we just had our interview with Ralph Pointer. Well, Danny Vila, who is a veteran labor organizer and also one of the host and producer of Voice Latina on WBAI Radio. I think one can adequately describe this program that is broadcast in Spanish and in English as the only Latina radio program that deals with progressive issues like none others. And Danny Vila is one of those hosts and producers. Danny, welcome to the program. We want you to start off, not with BAI, we'll get into that later, but for you to talk about the housing conference, the upcoming housing conference on October 26th, that's going to be at St. Mary's Church. It's a conference that has been organized by TAN, the Tenant Action Network, of which I am a member, and so are you. So if you could start off talking about the conference on the 26th.
Okay, Nellie. Greetings, Nellie. Good afternoon, and also good afternoon to all of our listeners, your listeners, and thank you for inviting me. Yeah, this conference is very important, and of course, anybody who organizes any conference on any day is going to say this conference is very important. But I think everybody who is listening has to take this into consideration. New York tenants, and actually we could say tenants across the country, right? But specifically here in New York City, we have been really under attack for decades. Real tenants, laws protecting tenants and other measures were really enacted back in the 1970s, perhaps in the 80s. But over the last 20 years, there has just been an onslaught against all the rights of tenants. And even when laws are on paper, there may be laws written, but it's a matter of how do you apply those laws. So what we're trying to be doing is to try to get tenants to unite around the concept of a tenants union. A tenants union. Now, this, to a lot of people today, is like maybe a foreign language. But once upon a time in New York City and many other urban centers across the country, it was very common for people to think in terms of organizing a tenants union or strong tenants organization, which would be their it's sort of like their matter of getting together and stopping the abuses of landlords. It's going to be held on October 21st. The conference will be held at St. Mary's Church starting at 1 p.m. And St. Mary's Church is over on 126th Street, 126th Street between West Broadway and Amsterdam Avenue.
That's Old Broadway and Amsterdam Avenue. That's those
right,
are
yes.
the cross streets.
Yes.
Old Broadway.
Old Broadway. I said West. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah, and so talk a little bit more about the conference in terms of specific details. What time is it going to be, and what you hope to cover in the conference?
Right. It's going to be at 1 p.m. And we hope to be wrapping up things already by 4 or 5 p.m. We hope, to have it at most 4 hours. We really don't want to go and be all over the place. We're going to be trying to focus specifically on the recent supposedly the laws which now supposedly guide and supposedly protect tenants in New York. These laws are really meant to protect and defend landlords around the Rent Stabilization Board. But in any case, we're going to be trying to see if we could form some type of a powerful tenants group. We're going to have various organizations taking place For example, Mirabal Sisters, which is in the Washington Heights area, mostly Dominican organization, is going to take place. The Citywide Alliance Against Displacement will be taking part in it. Obviously, you, Nelly Bailey, we hope will be one of the speakers also, and you have for many, many years been leader of the Harlem Tenants Council. We have some other organizations that have been, we've been in contact with them recently, which haven't told us specifically if they're going to be there, but we hope that at least 5 or 6 tenants organizations will be taking part in it.
Okay, thank you very much. And just to sum that up, October 26th, Housing Conference at St. Mary's Church. From 1 until 5 p.m., closing down at 4, and please come out. Now, we do have
real quickly,
talk about the newsletter, please.
Okay, well, real quickly, I forgot also to mention the Justice Center in El Barrio will be taking place. Also, the Youth Against Displacement will also take place. And how could I forget, the South Bronx Community Congress will be there, and the People Pueblo Party. And, of course, I will be taking part in it, and I'm part of the board of the Cesar Bacari Cultural and Labor Center. So we already have about 7 groups that are endorsing it, but we do, we are in contact with other small organizations to see if other groups join. I'm sorry, what was the question then?
Yeah, no, you covered that information in terms of others. We just wanted to repeat again for people who may have tuned in that the conference is on October 26th. That's a Saturday from 1 until 5 p.m. We do have a newsletter, and if you could talk about that and the distribution of that newsletter, that will give additional information.
Well, we have a Tenant Action Network newsletter. It's a 4-pager in color, newspaper format, tabloid format, and we have several thousand that we have been distributing, and actually you have helped us already getting many out, and yesterday several of us were on 125th Street and Malcolm X Boulevard, 4 of us actually, and we distributed several hundred newsletters or newspapers. And what was very interesting is that although it started out very slow, that is, for some reason, it took about half an hour or 40 minutes to people start receiving it, because very often in New York City it's difficult to distribute literature. People just walk by you. But after 30 minutes, it became very engaging with the public. And we several tenants came up to us with various situations, and they told us that they were going to take part in this conference, and they were very happy. One tenant in particular, a man, African-American man, he was telling us about a situation where the tenants in his building are being told, the landlord is knocking on the door and telling the tenants, can they move out next week or in 2 weeks? And this is absurd. It's just absolutely ridiculous. You cannot do that. There are laws protecting tenants, and they have to go to the court, and they have to give you, if they want to get you out right away, a court order or a court citation. And besides, there are also new rent laws that protect tenants that will give you an even longer, we could talk about that in a couple of seconds, time. But in any case, a landlord cannot go to your house, knock on your door, and tell you, can you move out next week, please, or in 2 weeks, or next month. It isn't like that. And so in any case, these tenants, we're going to be meeting with them next week, Nelly Bailey, and you're invited to take part in this meeting before we have the conference, and they will also be taking part in the conference.
Okay. Danny, we do have a bilingual tendency here. Could you repeat the basic information, date, and time of the housing conference in Spanish, please?
Okay, sí, la conferencia de vivienda que es establecida por lo que se llama en inglés la Tenant Action Network o Red de acción por los inquilinos o por derechos de los inquilinos en español. Se va a celebrar el 26 de octubre en la iglesia St. Mary's. La iglesia St. Mary's queda en la 126 entre Old Broadway y la avenida Amsterdam. 126 Old Broadway y Amsterdam, y se puede llegar allí tomando el tren número 1 hasta la Broadway. Y la conferencia va a comenzar a la 1 de la tarde y debe terminar máximo a las 5 de la tarde. Pero el propósito principal de la conferencia es organizar una unión de inquilinos, lo que llaman Tenants Union en inglés, que es un concepto que es viejo, de los 1920 y los 30 en este país. Una unión o coalición de varios grupos de inquilinos.
Thank you very much. Now, Danny, let's move on to the second part of our interview, which is, I think you underrate yourself. You are, in fact, a geopolitical analyst who has spoken, talked about, made presentations on the political situation in Central America, in Latin America, and just talk about that. Now, one country that is in the news almost every day is the unrest in Ecuador. So can you give us some background on that?
Yes, Nelly. I started becoming very, very interested in Ecuador some 25 years ago. It's a country like almost no other country for me in Latin America, because it is a country in which people these are very, very humble, hardworking people. You know, there's it's estimated there's about 400,000 Ecuadorians living in New York City. And
400,000?
Around 400,000. At least 400,000 Ecuadorians living in New York City. Many people see Latinos speaking Spanish and they think they're Mexicans or whatever. And in New York City, there are more Ecuadorians than Mexicans, actually. And this.
What's the population? Do you know the Mexican population here in New York City? Do you know that?
It's much less than that. I don't want to guess at a number because
but it's less than 400,000, which is the Ecuadorian population.
Yeah,
all right, please continue.
It would probably be around 150 to 200,000 Mexicans at least.
Mm-hmm. Okay, continue, please. Hello?
I have some friends, Ecuadorians, that told me there's 800,000 Ecuadorians here in New York City, and they may be right. There's a lot. And tell me, I work in Queens with basically a 90% Ecuadorian organization, and there are a lot. But in any case, the point that I'm trying to make here is that the large number of Ecuadorians coming over here came after a president in Ecuador named Jamil Mahuad, around the year 2000, he made all these ridiculous laws in which he valued and eliminated the Ecuadorian currency. I don't know if people know it, but in Ecuador, they use the American dollar. It's just like Puerto Rico. In Puerto Rico, you go to Puerto Rico, the currency is the USA buck, the dollar. In Ecuador, what you use is the American dollar. This is thanks to this trader to Ecuador, Jamil Mahuad, and people rebelled when he did that, because what happened is that people lost billions of dollars when they eliminated the currency and they established the American dollar as the official currency of Ecuador. And there was an uprising, and that guy was overthrown. Incredibly, he's a professor at Harvard University on political leadership. For you, it sounds like a joke, but he's a professor on political leadership at Harvard University, Jamil Mahuad. In any case, there was another president just before him who was overthrown, Bucaram, for the same reason, for being anti-worker. And then a president after Mahuad was overthrown by the people, masses, not too much violence. They just got into the presidential palace, literally, in the National Assembly. His name is Lucio Gutierrez. So there is this history, recent history, for the last 20 plus years of Ecuadorians taking part in uprisings. And right now you have a very corrupt flunky of the International Monetary Fund and of U.S. President Donald Trump, and his name is Lenin Moreno. Lenin Moreno is the president of Ecuador, and he decreed 2 weeks ago, Decree 883, that all the subsidies toward gasoline and energy products will be eliminated. This means that the cost of gasoline and everything that uses any type of petroleum or oil-based source of fuel is going to double, at least double, for many a little bit more than double.
It's going to double in price.
In price. So millions of people throughout the country are literally on the streets. I mean, all the provinces, all the countries. And the U.S. media is doing its job very well, keeping people ignorant. Around 20 people, maybe 30, have been killed over the last week. At least 20 to 30 people over the last 2 days. And there are many videos of this on the internet. There, you see the police shooting straight into the crowd, and you see young men and young women, even elderly and children have been killed. They're throwing gas indiscriminately into places that are, closed where there's no ventilation, and several people have suffocated. So there was an uprising against this. There was supposed to be today at 3 p.m. some type of initial negotiation between the government and the protesters. The last point I want to make here is that the president has abandoned the presidential palace, which is called the Palace Carondelet in Quito, Carondelet, and he has flown 6 hours away to a city, a major industrial city called Guayaquil, and he is hiding out at a military base in Guayaquil. So that is the situation in Ecuador in a nutshell.
Well, one of the things that few Americans understand in this immigration debate and discussion, as the corporate media push the reactionary line, these people just want to come in here and just get free benefits that we offer. But give us some context for the migration of folks from Central America, from Latin America, and why they are flooding to the U.S. gates and to the U.S. border. It is because of the political turmoil and civil strife that has been promoted, not only promoted, but incited by the U.S. government for its own imperialist gains.
Well, Nelly, over the last several years, over 1 million people from my country, Puerto Rico, have been forced to come to the United States. Puerto Ricans have it in a certain way easy to come to the U.S. because Puerto Ricans had American citizenship imposed on us in 1917 when the United States needed troops for the participating in World War I. When they entered the war late in 1917, right? And so they needed troops, so they gave us, they imposed citizenship on us. So as a result of that, we can easily come into the United States, and over 1 million over the last 10 years have migrated to the U.S. And in fact, I have 5 nephews and nieces, and they have all come over the last couple of years to the United States, and they're all working incredibly. They're all working. Although they were born and raised in Puerto Rico, being that their parents spoke English, they also speak perfect English, so they can do that. But most immigrants coming here, of course, are undocumented, and most are coming either through the borders in the south, or they come in as tourists, and then they just stay, do not go back to their countries. Of course, most of these people, practically all of these people that are undocumented, cannot apply for any type of social welfare benefits because they're undocumented. There's a little bit of leniency in New York City, where in New York, at least in terms of health care, for example, and education, there is no discrimination. But in most of the United States, it is very repressive, and if they know that you are undocumented, you better watch out. Most likely is they're going to come out, ICE is going to come out and arrest you, deport you. So most people do not even think of applying for any type of medical services, public services outside of New York City, for example, because of the racist impression that there is against immigrants. And one thing we should recognize, free medical care for everybody should be a right, period. Because sick people make other people sick. So if for no other reason that I want to be healthy, I should wish that the person next to me has free medical care so that I won't get sick. But in any case, it is actually very, very few benefits that any undocumented immigrants are receiving.
Well, you mentioned New York City as an exception, particularly under this current mayor, because if you are undocumented, you can receive New York City ID without any questions and stuff like that. But I think we need additional context for that because, and you need to bring in the issue of wage theft, is because New York City is largely a service industry, tourism and a service industry, restaurants, hotels. That's how Donald Trump got over here in New York City in terms of the number of, quote, illegal immigrants, unquote, that he hired. And for me, my analysis is that one of the reasons why New York City is so tolerant of so-called undocumented. That's a better word than illegal. I mean, what's illegal? I mean, you think about the illegal, quote, illegal immigrants who came here from European countries. I mean, no one ever talks about that. But to continue, the point is that these undocumented workers are employed in the hotels and they aren't paid anything. They're paid very low wages, or in the construction industry. And you and I once had a discussion about wage theft of undocumented workers or undocumented immigrants. And I know you have worked on this personally in terms of these corporation and business leaders who just flat out refuse to pay the workers. So talk about that and put it in the context of wage theft of undocumented workers.
Sure. Lily, I'm coordinator of labor affairs in Cesar Bacari Cultural and Labor Center in Queens.
I know that you are, which is why I asked.
More than 90% Ecuadorian, and we have managed in Cesar Bacari to get workers hundreds of thousands of dollars that they were owed by construction, restaurant, or whatever. But this is like a less than drop of the bucket. In New York City, at least $30 million are being stolen every week from workers. $30 million with an M.
$30 million a week in wage theft from undocumented workers.
And daily, at a national level, it's estimated, and there's an old number of like 4 or 5 years ago. It was estimated 4 or 5 years ago that there were $1 billion with a B, $1 billion daily taken away from workers. That is that they are not paid as a result of wage theft. Now, this is what happens. The companies, and they are not all in service. Here in New York City, at least, a large number is in the construction industry. Well, they hire you, they take you to work, and then they just tell you, we'll pay you later, and later never arrives. But the situation is that these workers, although they want to fight back, they're afraid to fight back because they're undocumented. And what happens? That hurts other workers that are documented, that is citizens, U.S. citizens, because the companies take people that they know that they are not going to pay them. So we're really talking about wage slavery, or slavery in the old way, in which people worked for nothing. And so who really gets screwed? Okay, that worker immediately, but also other workers indirectly who are that is American citizens, who who are denied those jobs because these companies prefer to take people that they're going to take as slaves. So, in fact, ending wage theft and what I call wage slavery is in the benefit of all workers, because what happens is that when those workers start getting paid good wages, then the other workers will also receive better wages and also receive jobs. So we all have to, in this sense, as we have to see each other as working people, not as whether we're citizens or not citizens. We have to see each other as members of the working class. And as a class, if they're exploiting a large number of people, well, that's hurting me because that means that my own salary is going to be lower or that I'm not even going to get a job. As long as other people are being literally treated as slaves, everybody gets hurt. So we all have to unite on this matter of ending wage slavery.
Wage slavery here in the U.S. has a boomeranging effect on other workers, and people have to understand that. And here's a question that is often asked. Why is it that the government never goes after the employer in these situations? They hire these folks. This is wage slavery, as you so graphically described it, but the government never goes after the perpetrators.
Never. In fact, you have to take them to court, and in court, these guys are given the few times that they go to court, which winds up being a few times. Of course, there's so many abuses and crimes being made that it's thousands of times, but it's literally like less than 1% of the cases. These guys are treated like they were gods. You know, they're given all the reverence in the world. And the worker is looked down upon as if the worker has to prove that he was a victim of wage theft. Even if you get 20 persons saying that they were not paid, they all got to come out and prove it individually. Even though one will be the witness of the other, the courts are very repressive, and the employers over and over again get away literally with slavery. And in fact, one old trick that they've been doing forever is, for example, a person that is an owner of a restaurant owes X amount of dollars to a worker or a whole bunch of workers, and he's at court. Well, what he does is he changes the name of the restaurant, that is, closes the previous corporation or company and opens it under a new name with the same menu, with the same tables, sometimes with the same workers that were servile to him, that did not criticize him, the loyal workers, and continues operation. And the court says, oh, no, it's a new business. We cannot, the old business went under. They don't have money to pay you. And in fact, there's a well-known, I'm not even going to mention the name right now because I think it's in the courts. There's a well-known supermarket in Lower Manhattan, which actually went under 3 years ago. They said that they are, that they don't have any money to pay the workers, and so they owe workers millions of dollars. They continue operating. Supposedly, they don't have money, but they continue operating, and they are not paying workers some back wages, millions of dollars in back wages. And the courts are very lenient with this supermarket. For example, they're a chain. A small chain. I'm not going to mention the name right now, but if they could do it, it's being done throughout the city by all types of employers. They know they can get over now in the courts.
Yeah, I think we have to acknowledge, which is very clear, not only from the examples that you have given, but all over the country, is that the courts are in league with big business. That's just that's a fact that we have to understand. Yep. So the judicial system is corrupt, and we have to understand that as well. But please continue with your analysis.
No, on that point, what I'm saying is that these companies, then what they do is they declare bankruptcy, and once a company declares bankruptcy, that's it. It's impossible to collect. And I had a case recently of a woman who was a victim of sexual harassment at one of these supermarkets that I'm talking about. It's a small chain. And she was a victim of sexual harassment. And we already had a lawyer, and we had a very good case. We had the evidence of having gone to the police to file a report. We had spoken with management. We had the names of management. We had other workers who were witnesses. And then it turned out that we couldn't file a lawsuit against this company because the company went under. They declared bankruptcy 3 years ago. So even they continue doing, in many places, sexual harassment even against the workers, women specifically mostly. And they get away with it also because all they have to do is say that they're in bankruptcy now and they can't pay you. So you can't even put a lawsuit against them. So what we have in New York City, basically throughout the country, but in New York City it's probably heightened more because of it's a very powerful urban center. It's basically rampant capitalism where working people are at a period right now of high degree of exploitation. Even, white middle-class young kids that think that they have it so good, they're really eating crap. When you compare when I was 30 years old, 25 years old, the amount of money that you paid for rent was maybe 1/5 of what you made, in the entire month. Today, these young white kids that think that they have it so good are paying close to half of their income in rent just to barely survive. And when we're talking about black and Latinos and Asians and immigrants, you pay more than half of your monthly income in rent. So, we're living in a situation, and that just spread. We have seen recently that there has been an increase in wages or salaries. They've gone up to $12, $13.50, $15 an hour. But look at the prices in the supermarkets and how much things have gone up in price. It's incredible. There's no control of prices. So the little advance that working people in New York City made by getting a $15 minimum wage, well, it disappeared because when I go to the supermarket, things that were $3.95 a year ago are now going for $5.95. So it's absurd.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, what we are seeing here, I mean, just a much broader context for this is the fact that workers, whether you are immigrants or not, undocumented or not, if you are working class in this country, increasingly you are catching hell. Stagnant wages, people paying half their income for rent or more. The subprime scandal scam in which generations of wealth of black homeowners was just wiped out, completely wiped out. Well, anyway, Danny, we're going to have to end it here. And I want to thank you very much for this very insightful interview. Do you have any last words? And then we're going to have to end it.
Yeah, I don't mean to make people feel like this is hopeless. And actually, all of this leads to just one solution, which we have to all unite around. When it comes to housing, we have to all create some type of become members of a tenants organization, be it what it is. And we have that conference coming down on October 26th at St. Mary's Church, where we hope to build a tenants union, citywide tenants union. And in terms of problems at work, at labor problems, we need a political party of the working class. We need a political party of the working class, which is of a socialist tendency, which is anti-capitalist and defends the rights of working people. And, once upon a time in this city, there were very powerful parties, several of them that were of a socialist tendency and defended the rights of workers. And that's why we have unions in this country, because those parties united and they created unions. Today, we do not have in New York City a political party of the working class. We got to get down to that. And
thank you very much for that. As a matter of fact, on Danny Vila's last point, we're going to deal with next week, and we have a commentary from the late Bruce Dixon, who's going to give us a history of how the government has excluded socialist parties. And at one time, that was not the case. Anyway, thank you very much, Danny Vila, veteran organizer, geopolitical analyst. And that concludes our program Behind the News for Liberation and Political Consciousness, right here on GHCR.NYC. Thank you so much for listening. I'm your host and producer, Nellie Hester Bailey, and be sure to tune in next week. And we wish to give our thanks to our engineer, Doug Frazier. Peace.